You should never trust an author when they're talking about how their book came to be, because right, it's another fiction.
You're listening to Radio Free Mike. Welcome to Radio Free Mike, the podcast about freedom and its discontents. My name is Michael Scott Moore, and today we're talking to Antoine Wilson, a Canadian-American novelist based in LA and the author of Mouth to Mouth, a taut short novel that did really well when it came out 3 years ago. It's about a man who gives a stranger mouth-to-mouth resuscitation on the beach in Santa Monica, but then can't resist learning about the saved man's life and sort of squirming his way into it like a spy. It became a Los Angeles Times bestseller, even though it deals with metafictional themes like unreliable narrators and the nature of storytelling itself. Antoine, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Mike.
How's it going?
Flying level. Flying level.
Okay,
going.
That's
flying
better
level
than
through.
That's better than it could be.
Yeah, through some bumpy weather, but not too bad. Cloudy.
You and your family were caught slightly in the LA fires, I think.
Yeah, here's the weird thing about the fires is, first of all, I think the fire came within a mile of us,
wow.
Right? And then, and the go zone was one house away from
the
us.
Evacuation zone. Mm-hmm.
The evacuation zone. So, we were, when the fires started up, I went over to 26th Street in Santa Monica, the border of Brentwood, and I could see the fire on the hill. And there are a bunch of people there who had evacuated already. Right. And they're just talking about where it is and stuff. And they said, it's at the top of Temescal. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know you could see the top of Temescal from there, but that's what that was, right? I get home. I tend to try to keep everybody calm around here because I'm pretty firm in the belief that our neighborhood could never burn, but
right.
That may be a naive belief at this point. Mm-hmm. In any case, had dinner, and then I brought my son over to the same spot on 26th on Allenford, actually, to take a look. Mm-hmm. And holy cow, we were like, oh no, the flames are, they're coming down to sunset. This is too close.
Visible from your yard, or?
Not visible from our house, no.
But nearby,
yeah, the tree, the smoke was, but the trees are kind of in the way.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, maybe, let's head back to the house and maybe pack up, just in case. And then as soon as we decided to do that, and my daughter was taking a bath, the power went out.
Jesus.
And then it was like, okay, well, we'll go. And we've had a place in Oxnard for a long time. So it wasn't a tough decision to load up all 3 cars and go to Oxnard.
And bug out.
Bug out. We expected to be there for a couple days, and I think we were there for 12 days.
Wow. Almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The cat was really not happy about it.
Cats don't like to move.
No. And it was a really interesting response in the family. My daughter's 11. And they were really worried about their artwork,
right? All
of the art that they've made. They're a pretty hardcore artist. My son was sort of with me on the, I don't think we're going to burn. And he just brought like one change of clothes. He's just like, And that was his way of dealing with it. And my wife, we live in my wife's childhood home. So for her, I think the idea that it could burn goes straight to the amygdala, right?
Of course.
And so she packed quite a few more things, and I brought the passports and whatever, and then weirdly, I packed my cameras. I'm a photographer, and I love my cameras, all of which are replaceable, and I left behind my negatives, which are not replaceable. So I don't know, maybe that it says that I have an outlook to the future, or that I'm not good at thinking ahead.
thinking through priorities. No,
Right.
Overall, I think you did okay. Because you came back to an intact house, right?
Yes, came back to an intact house. Just had to, empty a fridge of rotting food.
Right.
The advantage to being on the border line of the go zone is the National Guard was parked in front of our house essentially
Oh, wow.
the whole time. So that, because one of the great fears in this neighborhood was looters. And I heard stories the other night from the sort of property owners association meeting that there are a couple of wealthy people in the neighborhood who hired private security for the entire neighborhood. Some hired private security just for their homes, but apparently the ones that were hired for the whole neighborhood did, like 100 calls in the first 2 nights of just going house to house, grabbing looters, chasing them away. They had some handcuffed at one point. And LAPD just said, we're too busy. We can't.
Right.
So they just had to drive the looters to the edge of the neighborhood and let them go, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay. So that's just sort of what happened to us. And it was scary. My wife says I downplay it all the time, but it's fairly scary. But in the end, what was it? It was an inconvenience, right? That's right. I made some ice cream. I lost that ice cream. I had some great wild caught salmon. I lost my wild caught salmon. Yeah, exactly. The cat was angry. Whatever. Then you get to the other side of it, and there are people who have lost everything.
Yeah.
Everything. It's not like a hurricane where, some people are devastated but everybody is touched in some way, like physically. It's a very weird thing how so much goes back to normal that quickly.
Well, a lot of people from the Palisades seem to have moved to the South Bay. They're at least renting down here for a little while.
Yeah.
So that's going to change the South Bay. Maybe
a lot of things are going to change. And a lot of our beloved, my wife grew up here, so a lot of her childhood memories are in the Palisades, going to do things in the Palisades. Some of our favorite restaurants.
Both in the Palisades and in Alameda, the very old neighborhoods and landmarks were destroyed. I mean, a lot of what made the Palisades unique was not the property values, which have spiked in the last 2 decades, but the buildings and the landmarks that go back several decades, and that stuff's destroyed. When they rebuild it, it's not going to be the same.
No, it's going to look like the Caruso Mall. It'll look like new construction.
Right.
And
exactly.
and I think the Palisades are a lot of multi-generational families.
Right.
And then the people who bought in and drove up the property values, besides just the West Side going up, are people who wanted to live in that town.
Yeah.
The unpretentious vibe, slightly Stepford,
Yep.
of like the kind of small town that's not that far out. It's not Malibu out, but it's 1 degree past Mandeville, right? It's kind of like, it's a pretty sad one. And then, are you surfing down there?
Yeah, I've been out a couple of times, but I'm taking it easy because nobody knows what the water's like.
Right.
Heal the Bay doesn't even know what's in the water. They haven't been able to do enough testing to figure out what might have slid into the water.
Right. Yeah, that's another group that's affected is people who enjoy being in the ocean.
Yeah, they claim it's clean below Dockweiler Beach, but I'm not so sure. I broke my leash the other week too, so I've been taking it easy.
Yeah, I don't know what divides Dockweiler from anything else. Nothing.
Exactly, it's all water.
It's not like, if you tell me it's north of Point Dume, it's fine, or south of Palos Verdes, then I'm like, okay, well at least those are the edges of the bay, the borders of the bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about your book, Mouth to Mouth, which is not a brand new novel, but it's your latest novel, and this is a brand new podcast. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the book and some developments since it came out. I'm as much of a fan of the book as anyone else. I thought it was terrific,
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about how it came together? I know it took a while to write, and also some of the personal sources for the book, because it's on the surface it's a very smooth book. It reads very cleanly, and it doesn't necessarily feel personal. But why don't you tell me first what it's about?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, that's interesting that you say it doesn't feel personal. I, it has so many personal sources, but I agree with you. Exactly. It's not a very personal feeling book. Mm-hmm. What is it about? Well, it's about a guy who's just out of college in the 90s, and he's been dumped by his girlfriend, and he kind of doesn't have anything going on. He can't sleep, goes to watch the sun come up, and he ends up rescuing an ocean swimmer who has a medical event in the water, pulls the guy out of the water and gives him CPR and brings him back around. Mm-hmm. Then eventually the lifeguards show up, EMS shows up, they take the guy away. And this guy, Jeff, is sort of left traumatized by this experience, and also sort of confused about what it is he's done. And so he ends up trying to find out who it was he saved. And who it was he saved turns out to be this prominent art dealer, Beverly Hills based art dealer. And, the narrative is Jeff sort of observing, maybe stalking, maybe worming his way into this art dealer's life. And that whole narrative is being told by Jeff many years later to an anonymous narrator, the sort of authorial stand-in, in a first-class lounge at JFK. And these two knew each other in college a little bit, and bump into each other at the airport. And Jeff, who's now a very fancy art dealer guy,
he's become an art dealer himself.
He's become an art dealer himself. Invites the narrator up to the first class lounge and sees him as sort of an opportunity to tell this story that he's never told anybody about, how he came to be who he is today.
Mm-hmm. And it comes off at the end as a confessional.
It is. It is a confessional, and it's also, if I could say anything about Jeff, is that there's something about he refuses in a lot of ways to acknowledge any darker side to his own ambition, or maybe even his ambition at all. So he's this, and that's sort of maybe what a lot of the book consists of thematically, maybe. I don't know. I've never read it.
As a reader. Yeah, you've said that.
As a reader, it's impossible.
One person on the planet who cannot read your own book as a reader.
One person on the planet.
I have the same problem. Well, so one of the personal sources is that you actually did save somebody's life.
Yeah. And so the funny thing is, so when you get when you sell a book and it's going to come out, you talk to your publicist and they say, okay, what do you got? Right? Like, how are you going to talk about this book?
Right.
And at that point, I said to her, literally, and I'm not trying to be glib, I used to be the person who wrote this book. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's all I have. Mm-hmm. So we need to work from first principles here. So she said, okay, we'll do a Q&A. So we did a Q&A, and it helped me develop that meta narrative that goes with when you're talking about a book. You should never trust an author when they're talking about how their book came to be, because right, it's another fiction. However,
that's true.
It's also a fiction that's based in truth, and it had to do with, I had to trace back to figure out what the origins were, and they're legitimately these sort of funny steps. And the first one was in the mid-90s. I was in Seattle with a couple of friends, and it was Seafair, which is when they have like the Navy ships and the jets and stuff. Like a Fleet Week type thing down in the harbor.
Fleet Week, right.
Yeah. And so we were down there, and there are some freight train tracks that run right through the middle of that area. And there was a guy walking along, air drumming, headphones on, and he was on this sort of collision course to step in front of this freight train at an angle where he was not seeing that he was about to do it. So I yelled at him, and then he turned around and looked at me, but kept walking. And then I was like, no, and started waving my arms, and he stops. And then like the train went by right in front of him, and it was, I mean, he was shocked, right? And he was like, oh my God, you saved my life. And then he said, I'm going to buy you a big steak dinner.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're listening to a free preview of this episode. And if you'd like to hear more, please hit the link in your show notes or in the bottom of the email we've sent you and sign up over at Substack. The whole podcast is open to subscribers to Radio Free Mike. And you can hear the whole thing at michaelscottmore.substack.com. Thanks for listening.